You've already successfully located the perfect CV, and now the moment has truly arrived when you'll discuss with the prospective candidate about the specific job to ultimately hire them. In other words, the essential job interview. But tell me honestly today, truly, really honestly, hand on heart, has it ever happened that you had a perfectly prepared and polished CV ready to go? You genuinely thought you had indeed found the absolutely ideal candidate for the crucial position at work. The comprehensive job interview was conducted almost perfectly, and the prospective candidate seemed nearly ideal, truly exceptional. But when it came to actually working and performing the required duties, it unfortunately turned out that this particular candidate was completely and utterly unsuited for the demanding position they were initially hired for. Has this ever happened to you? But please be honest with me, because I will definitely check. I am absolutely convinced that this has most certainly happened to you, but today I will tell you precisely why such truly absurd and perplexing situations occur. I'll tell you this as an employee, as someone who sometimes also had a truly perfect CV, also absolutely aced the job interview, and yet, despite all that, it turned out I was completely and utterly unsuited for the specific position. And now I'll explain to you why this happens and where these discrepancies come from. Between what you see on a CV, what you see during the job interview, and then later, how the candidate actually turns out to be completely unsuitable for the position. To determine this, first and foremost, we need to answer one fundamental question. What do you really expect from the candidate, and what do other managers expect as well? From my own experience, when I was going through job interviews, in fact, when I was the one answering questions from a prospective employer. Therefore, let me tell you that most of us are prepared for such an interview. We know that there will often be truly absurd questions. What experience do I truly have? What am I genuinely capable of? What are my primary strengths? What are my significant weaknesses? At what precise angle should I hold a spoon when I am eating? Or 10 creative uses for that spoon besides just eating. You know, sometimes the questions at these job interviews are really quite absurd, but generally we know how to effectively answer them. Besides, these days artificial intelligence can also help us prepare for such an interview. But tell me then, how do you catch the absolute best candidate? To attract the very best, top-notch talents to your valuable company. Here again, I will tell you a detailed story from my personal real life, how it looked in my case. Because I mentioned to you earlier on that I worked at a company where I indeed started to develop professionally and personally, to get as much information as possible. Every day I continually learned, truly learned, and learned again, because without significant pain there is no personal growth. And that's exactly how I carefully approached my social status and career advancement, because I truly figured that if I could learn something new, I could effectively surpass others. It turned out that wasn't quite the actual case. Why? Because the people who ultimately got the team leader position had more relevant experience than I did. And sometimes it happens that someone has a lot of work experience, a long tenure, but in the end, it turns out that this person knows as much as they did 20 years ago. But let's be honest, technology is evolving, everything is evolving. For example, in the past, if someone was a chef, there was just regular cuisine, but now there's molecular cuisine. 20 years ago, there were basic automation systems, and now, for example, there are automation systems based on artificial intelligence. Look at how much artificial intelligence itself has developed in just the past 3 years. In reality, with artificial intelligence, you can do so much, which you'll learn about in one of the chapters, that you'll be genuinely shocked, either positively or negatively, by how much you can achieve. So if someone isn't developing themselves, what does it matter if, for example, they have experience, if in terms of personal growth, they've actually just stopped moving forward? I'm also truly convinced that another thing you pay close attention to is higher education. And in reality, even if a given candidate knows all sorts of things and is an excellent specialist, they're still limited, for example, by the lack of higher education, and because of that, they can't indeed get into your company. And of course, they want to act honestly and not falsify documents just to get a job with you. Because as you know yourself, it would be quite unethical from both sides for both reasons. But that's not the point. But think about two people who graduated from university. We mentioned this in the previous lesson. If someone went to university out of passion because they love a particular profession, for example, they've dreamed since childhood of becoming a doctor, of becoming, say, the most famous cardiac surgeon in the world, and in fact, they devote every free moment to gaining as much knowledge as possible, reading various scientific publications, and learning as much as they can about the subject. Tell me honestly, which doctor would you rather go to? One who doesn't have 20 years of experience, or one who has 20 years of experience and is excellent, and who does it with passion? Or one who has 20 years of experience, but does everything routinely, reluctantly, and you can just tell that he hates his job, his patients, and everything just bothers him? Which one of them would you rather go to? I don't know about you, but I would rather go to the doctor who truly loves his job, approaches his work with genuine commitment, not with experience, but with profound commitment, and sincerely wants to work, who simply loves people and truly wants to help them. And that's precisely what will really determine whether the operation goes well. At least that's how I see it. You can share your opinion in the comments below the course, whether you agree with me or have a different point of view. However, I think that commitment at work is much more important than that proverbial piece of paper. Another reason why you might lose a very valuable candidate is your optical illusion, the so-called mirage. Because you'll be judging this candidate excessively based on their appearance. Take me, for example. How old do you think I am? Because I'm telling you about my 20 years of experience, yet people often perceive me as a very young person. Yes, this happened to me very often during job interviews. And the first thing that would come out of my future employer's mouth was, "You are a young man." And I was already 30 years old. Now I'm 40. Maybe by the time you're watching this course, it will turn out that I'm even older because it depends on when you started this course. But above all, people judge very much based on appearance, and maybe that's not necessarily how they should judge, because even if someone looks young, they might have a lot of experience. How does it look, for example, going back to the topic of CVs? You look at it and think, he's too young, I'm not gonna hire him. So what is this young person supposed to do? Put yourself in his position. Imagine that you look quite young and everyone just judges a book by its cover and you get rejected by many companies simply because you appear young. So what is this young person supposed to do? Should he just take a photo of his friend, paste it into his own CV, and then when he shows up for the interview and the prospective employer says, "But that's not you," he replies, "Exactly, because otherwise you wouldn't have hired me." And such a situation actually happened somewhere in the world once, where someone did exactly that, because he had a young face, looked young, and he pasted his friend's photo into his CV just to get invited to a job interview at all. Another significant reason why you might potentially lose a very valuable employee for your company could be the entire interview process with that particular person. Think carefully about whether you truly want to find a really good, highly qualified employee, or if you just want to quickly hire the very first person you happen to come across, without much consideration. Of course, the first answer, because you want to hire the best specialist available on the entire job market. But what do you need to do in that case? I know you're the boss and I know you're the one paying, and it seems to you that you have the power. But let's be honest, if an employee is truly the best in their chosen field, you really have to treat them with proper respect and inherent dignity and not flaunt your authority, suggesting that you're the one paying and they should be very humble. Or perhaps overly polite during the interview process. Of course, they can certainly be polite because that's indeed what their personal culture dictates. But let's be truly honest, this conversation needs to be a partnership. You absolutely can't show them that you're speaking from a position of significant power, because in reality, they likely have 10 or more compelling job offers, and simply talking to you is just one of their many available options. Now, I think it's time to move on to my favorite aspect of all job interviews, which is, of course, salary. Your absolute favorite topic, boss. And I truly think here we're treading on very, very thin ice, because this particular subject is just as incredibly uncomfortable for me as it is for you. And here, in the very next chapter, we will thoroughly talk about precisely how much to offer a new employee at the very start. But let's get back to the topic, because you'll probably be setting the pay rate during the job interview. And why am I telling you this? Very often during job interviews, I consistently encountered a particular tone where the employer tried at all costs to significantly lower my salary. The arguments? Because you are a young person, because you do not have much experience, and because you do not know this particular job very well. In reality, he hasn't even worked with me yet, but he already knows that I'm not suited for this position. And what exactly does such an employer think? That now I shall humbly kneel before him and beg on my knees just to get a job with him? But excuse me, I don't know who is supposed to be begging whom on their knees. Because, for example, if I know my own worth, and even though at the moment I don't yet have the proper paperwork to run my own company, say, in the field of automation here abroad where I work every day, I simply can't perform jobs independently for someone, stamp them, and sign off on them. But on the other hand, that doesn't mean I don't know anything. In fact, I know that I can do a lot. The company has also invested a lot of energy in me, for which I am extremely grateful to the company I currently work for. But now let me get to my point. If the tone of the job interview is such that you're trying to pay the employee as little as possible, believe me, they'll notice it very quickly, and at that point, you'll be at the very bottom of their list, because you haven't even started working with them yet and you're already devaluing their worth. So what will happen later? And that's exactly what I wanted to refer to. You see, this topic is really important, and when it comes to salary, it's important for both sides. I know you genuinely don't want to pay this particular employee millions of dollars, but believe me, he also certainly doesn't want to earn so little that he absolutely has to wonder whether he'll truly make it through the entire month after receiving his paycheck. Because that's not the point. If he's worried about making it through the next month, instead of focusing on his work for you and doing it diligently, his mind will be elsewhere. And that's not what you want, and he'll very quickly notice that his value is being underestimated. What else could scare off your ideal candidate, the one you've been searching for so long? First of all, if you ask him, are you resistant to stress? Or can you work under stress? You've probably asked your job candidate this particular question more than just once, and at that very moment, an internal conflict truly starts to arise within his mind. Why exactly? First of all, if he's been consistently seeing your company's job posting for several months or even for a number of years, he will certainly start to suspect that there's a very toxic atmosphere at your company. So, if he's a truly good employee and other employers are actually actively competing for him, you'll inevitably end up at the very bottom of his list. And you want to be first. If you also add the element of low pay, or perhaps even scheming to pay him as little as humanly possible to the overall mix of factors, believe me, he might just get up, slam the door, and never come back to you again. And if he does come back, it will only be because other employers have rejected him. But you definitely wouldn't want to be treated in that particular way yourself. That's why if you want to hire the best employee on the market, treat him like a partner, not like a servant. Now let's put all these puzzle pieces together into one beautiful whole, and you can find out why, up until now, you haven't found the ideal candidate you've been searching for so long, and why he slipped away from you right under your nose. First of all, if you consider the fact that you're trying to lower his salary right from the start by force. Secondly, you ask him if he is resistant to stress. Thirdly, your job posting has been up for a very long time, and he suspects that there is a very toxic atmosphere at your workplace and that something is wrong with your company. Think about it carefully. Would such an ideal and qualified candidate want to work in a toxic and unpleasant company with low pay, where he would also have to argue and negotiate with management for any money just to get any kind of a raise? Oh, or my favorite phrase, now at this moment we'll give you 4,000 and later 7. And what does the employee say? I'll come by a little later. So really think about how that actually looks, and if you truly are offering this to the employee, at the very least make absolutely sure it's clearly in the contract. Because if you promise him, and believe me, if your employee has a lot of experience and is a great person who wants to work in a team and will cooperate well with your group, then trust me, such an employee also has his own expectations and experience and has already encountered situations more than once where he was deceived because someone initially offered him a low salary and then either fired him to replace him or simply never paid him the promised money. So be careful with such scheming, because your employee is more intelligent than you think. That's why you should take care of good people. Believe me, it pays off for everyone involved. And in the next upcoming lessons, I will explain why. Because if this employee truly gains valuable experience with you, generally, if they love this particular job or gradually grow to love it, they most certainly won't get worse over time. They will get better and better, and every day they will do the job more efficiently and faster. They will do the job more intelligently, and what's more, they'll even suggest some ideas and solutions to you which will benefit the whole company. Of course, that's if you accept some of their suggestions and see that thanks to them, the whole company can grow. But of course, they also truly need to get something valuable out of it, because if you genuinely don't appreciate them, you will inevitably lose them. Another significant absurdity in management is that very often, as an employer or a potential future employer for this particular candidate, you tend to focus excessively and perhaps even exclusively on their education, their specific skills, and their professional experience. But hold on just a moment. Now the question is about their character. What kind of person are they? For example, is their glass always full, or is it sometimes half empty too? Because you know what I mean. First of all, if their glass is full, you can't pour anything into it, not even a drop of water. If they're full and won't let anyone tell them anything, you can't explain anything to them. You can't clarify anything because they already know everything. They know best. In reality, working with them will be very difficult. Because what does it matter that they have experience? Because every company has its own unique work culture. And just like a chameleon adapts to its surroundings, you have to adjust a bit to each company. And I'm sure you'll agree with me on that. That's why you also need to look for someone whose glass is a little bit empty so that you can pour something into it. In other words, someone you can actually tell something to. This is very important, and that person also needs to have a bit of humility because, for example, if they come to work for me, let me give you an example. And let's say I'm younger than them, will that person let someone younger than themselves tell them something? In reality, the best and most effective way to truly verify your potential employee will be through your subordinates. If you introduce them to your subordinates, you'll clearly see how they treat them, whether they treat them with genuine respect or if they just arrogantly hold their head high and treat others as inherently inferior. I'm convinced because you've been through many courses and trainings, and I'm 100% sure that you'll definitely notice this. You need to pay very close attention to this because if they don't cooperate with the group, your results will also decline instead of improving. Or, to put it another way, they'll make mistakes and you'll be the one paying for those mistakes. And what if you're planning to hire a candidate, but you have absolutely no knowledge of their job? It's definitely worth asking your subordinates as well and carefully checking the candidate's competencies in the actual presence of your entire team. Let me tell you a personal story about how I myself was unfortunately disqualified by an employment agency where the person who was interviewing me masterfully and skillfully ruled me out for that specific position. There was a particular time when I was really quite bad at performing electrical work. I wasn't doing it particularly well at all, and he simply tested me by handing me the detailed schematics. And when I didn't really handle those schematics well, he saw that something was missing in my skill set, and because of that, he was able to quickly assess whether I was suitable for the position or not. So act wisely, check competencies, even if you don't know much about their work, ask others for help. So to sum up everything, if you truly want to hire the absolute best employee for the specific position you are diligently looking to fill, please do not focus so much on their formal education or extensive work experience, but rather, more importantly, on their inherent competencies and valuable skills. If the work comes quite naturally and effortlessly to them, you'll definitely notice with a given specialist whether they perform the job with remarkable ease or if it causes them any significant trouble. I think, as a seasoned manager, you undoubtedly know this already. I don't really need to tell you how to effectively check that particular aspect. If you lack certain competencies, ask your colleagues for help. Another thing you should pay attention to is their character. Does this person simply like people, and will they work well with your team? Because if the cooperation is good, even people from your team will help them out. In one of the upcoming lessons, we will also discuss and talk about how to properly onboard a new employee and how to do it effectively, because an employee without proper onboarding is very much like a computer without essential software. And as you most probably learned in your computer science class, just like I did, a computer without any software is essentially a completely useless device. In the same way, your employee will be useless without proper onboarding. Thank you for completing this lesson. I sincerely hope that my suggestions will prove to be very useful to you. Hire wisely, hire thoughtfully, always look at character, always look at competence, and truly see if they do their job exceptionally well and if they genuinely enjoy doing it. If that's the case, then you've hit the jackpot, and I sincerely wish you to hire the best professionals so that when we have the chance to meet, you can tell me, "Thank you very much, and congratulations for helping me so well to hire the best people for my team, and I congratulate you on completing this lesson. I invite you to the next one, and thank you for your attention."